Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers of happiness, joy, and a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation, and we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Melissa, it was my golden anniversary last night. I don't think that's a thing I just made up.
Oh.
We got married on the 21st, and it was our 21st wedding anniversary.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that could be a golden anniversary, right?
Well, not in the traditional sense, but it could be in the
golden birthdays
new
work
way.
that way.
I think golden is 25, maybe.
Okay. Well, I'll have to wait.
Anyway, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Amber and I were out to dinner last night at our very favorite restaurant in White Bear Lake, which
That's
is called
awesome.
Aqua.
Oh.
And so we had a nice time, and she asked what the podcast was going to be about this morning. She's like, "What's your podcast going to be tomorrow?" It's like, I don't know. Melissa and I didn't talk about it yet. And she goes, "You should talk about relationships, really long-running relationships."
I love that. Yeah.
So this is a podcast suggested by Amber.
Amber, yay. I love it. You know, I always love how Amber is the one who is very consistent and quietly always just does the things, right? She's supportive, she's helpful, she just does the things. And those are kind of markers of a really good long-term relationship, right?
Yeah, I was actually I was trying to compliment her last night about that. I don't know that I did a very good job, but so she can hear it maybe for a second time here.
Yeah.
But I was just commenting to her how I've always felt really supported by her.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of stuff, right? And I'm going every direction all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm into, all sorts of weird hobbies all the time.
Yeah.
And learning new things.
Switching them to a lot. Yeah.
And she's always very supportive and accommodating of all of that stuff. And I'll observe other people in relationships.
Yeah.
And their spouse doesn't let them do stuff. I mean, we've all kind of probably seen relationships where ooh, that person's on a really short leash.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's always uncomfortable to witness that too, I think.
And so I really appreciated that she supports me in so many of the things that I want to do.
Yeah. And you know what? She has always been so supportive of me too. And our little business meanderings. I mean, she's always been so supportive, and I've never, ever felt anything but that from her, which is really saying something too, woman to woman. Sometimes there isn't that feeling. So I've always really appreciated it. So thank you, Amber.
So let's talk about how we're going to keep how these, now both you and I are over 20-year long marriages, right?
Yeah.
And and we've had the various very long running relationships. So
right. Yeah.
Let's talk about how those work, how those look, how those feel, right? Maybe how those change over time.
Yeah. I think there's a number of long relationships that we have. It isn't just the marital or the spousal or the partner relationship, but there's also best friends.
Yep.
Friends that we've had. There's family.
Yep.
There's
your parents.
Right? Yeah. And I would even separate, actually, from the family perspective, I would separate parents, siblings, aunts and uncles. And I think that long relationships have different markers to them than shorter relationships. You think differently in a long-term relationship. You act differently in a long-term relationship. You feel differently, right? So it's hitting all those emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical bodies that we talk about. Long relationships affect them very differently, right, than short-term ones. And I think sometimes it's easier. A lot of times it's way, way easier And then how I always say your greatest strength becomes your biggest liability. Sometimes easier can be lazy.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So anyway, unlike you, we had talked about this for 10 minutes, or actually we texted each other last night, or you texted me last night.
I texted you during my romantic anniversary dinner.
Well, that was cute, though. You sent me a picture of the two of you. That was so cute. That was such a cute picture. I loved it. Yeah, so it was funny because last night, it was pouring rain again last night. We're in the great spring of Minnesota. And kind of woke up a couple times. Each time I woke up, what was really weird is I had another thought about, long distance relationship. And I made a mental note at like 3:00. Geez, I should write these down because these are so cool. So I did. I woke up this morning and I wrote down a little list.
Yeah, I'm usually the list person.
Right. Do you have a list today?
I don't have a list. I'm
What?
just winging it today.
Did you Google?
Nothing.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me give you kind of the list of what I wrote about the positives of this. Is just the Melissa perspective, right?
Yeah.
The kinds of emotions or things that happen when you're in a longer term relationship. To me, and this is the plus list. I'll go on the negative list later. The plus list. It's trusted. Like meaning you trust the other person to be the way they always are. So it might not even be a discussion or a take out the trash kind of trust, but it's just there's a confidence in that long-term relationship about how that other person's going to be with you and be in the world, representing you if it's a spousal or partner. So trust is one of them. The other thing I think that's really interesting about long-term relationships is grace. I feel like in a longer-term relationship, we are more apt to give grace to people.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean when I say that? Like,
well, yeah, that's an interesting one. I have to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, and
there's there are times. I think you're right. There's times where I'll extend grace to like people that I don't know very well.
Oh, okay.
Mostly as a almost like a move of indifference.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but that's a lack of investment though. So that's not really grace. That's more apathy.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't really care,
Yeah, identifying my emotions properly.
But I mean, like if somebody snaps at you, or they're short, or something like that. And
I think to have to get to the like long-term relationship checkpoint.
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
do have to have grace. I mean, I think certainly like I think maybe back when I was like younger and like newer in our relationship, I probably didn't extend grace as much as I should have.
Yeah, exactly.
I think over time it's like, oh yeah, no, I can just do this more. It's like better if I extend grace. And I'm not so quick to like judge or hold someone too accountable in a particular moment.
So I was laughing because as you were talking about that, I agree 100%. And I was seeing myself as my younger self in the early stages of my marriage, right? So, because we've been married 28 years. I don't know. I never remember. Once you hit the checkpoint, you don't have to keep track of it. That's not true. I'm just making excuses. Okay. But I pictured myself when you said that, like lying in wait, like early on in our marriage, Mitch would go up to the cabin and on Sunday he'd say, okay, I'll be home by 3. He was never home by 3. Never, not once. And he would come skating in at about 6. And I was so mad. Right? And I almost like pictured myself hiding in a plant waiting, like just my eyes poking over the top, just mad and just watching every minute getting madder and madder, knowing he was not going to be there at 3:00. you know? Now, past the checkpoint, I love that
Yep.
term. I'm like, oh, you're gonna be home at 3? Okay, cool.
Okay.
I'm
See
gonna
you
be,
at 7.
I'll see you at 7. Maybe, I'm not sure if I'll be home. You know what I mean? Just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So, is it grace? I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's grace or it's just,
Tolerance.
oh, that's a good word. Maybe that's what it is more tolerance. But that's not all bad, right?
No, it's not bad at all.
All right. So
I
here I have,
actually like on that. I heard this funny joke like that like really marriage is just about finding someone who you can tolerate
yeah.
chewing next to.
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know because I will confess we have a large, spacious 3-level premise, and I can hear Mitch 2 stories down chewing chips, and I will shout at the top of my lungs, I can hear that.
All right, so don't put that one on your list. All right, what else? Let's keep
All right.
let's keep moving.
All right. I don't know if I think what happens too in long-term relationships is you spend less emotional energy in responses and reactions.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you're in your
Mm-hmm.
earlier parts of your relationship, you're not in it looking at it long term. So every action, every experience is a thing, right?
Mm.
And I think in a long-term relationship, your vision casts further to the shore opposite of the lake. Like, I just
Mm-hmm.
think you start having a longer-term vision and response mechanism to things.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that's correlated with like you working on a relationship or you working on like you just being more mature as a person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you can't be a 20-year-old person in a 20-year-long
Yeah.
romantic relationship, right?
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, even
So
in
part
even in a friendship, like,
yeah,
I think
because
that's a really good
childhood
word,
stuff is a
maturity.
little, but yeah, that could be like a maturity thing for the relationship and for just the individual person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And actually, you know what's funny? It's like you can see people who are older
Mm-hmm.
operating with less maturity, and it really is obvious,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have different opinions about people that are not maturing at the same rate as their physical age
Mm.
or their professional
Yeah, right.
age or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's interesting. Um, and I wrote that I think sometimes a long-term relationship, and this is kind of funny, and you might push back on this a little bit, but some parts of being in a long relationship is less work.
Mm. Well, I agree. Like you can autopilot a
Yep.
relationship no problem,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yep.
It's just like you get the habits grooved in, and then
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's just not
Yeah.
um
It's easy to fall into patterns.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very easy to fall into patterns. So those are, and that one is on that slippery slope where too much of that then isn't a positive anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But those are kind of some of the things that I thought about for the benefits of a long relationship
Yeah.
and security and safety.
Well, yeah, I think that would be like the one of the primary
Mm-hmm.
reasons to be in a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for a long time. It's like being on your own for um yeah, kind of completely like on your own for like kind of the journey of life
Yeah.
is scary.
Yeah. Lonely too.
Lonely. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have like some
Yeah.
of my best girlfriends I've had for 10, 20, 30 years, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
more. And I just think to all the dark spots of my life. And I always had a clutch of people I could lean into.
Mm-hmm.
And that provided me security and kind of a foundation that
Yeah.
remembered me when, you know,
Mm.
it's like not when I was in my adult problems now, but just remembered the person I was, like the humor I had,
Mm-hmm.
what made me me even when I was young.
Mm.
And I think there's
So
something very stabilizing about that.
yeah. Yeah, it's um it is interesting to think about, like, you know, like we have like spousal relationships,
Hmm.
right? Um, but like the long friend relationships are, they're almost the same, right?
Hmm.
They take the kind of
Hmm.
same work, they kind of go through
Yeah.
maybe even similar cycles, right?
Yeah.
Think
Yep.
about like relationship cycles a bit because it's
Yeah.
like
Oh, that's a
it's
good
not
one. Yeah.
it's like it doesn't stay the same for 20 years in a row. It's like not a perfect.
Hmm.
Maybe some people have this,
Never.
but
I don't
like
think so. Not a
no.
chance. Mm-mm.
But they go kind of up and down. Like there's
Yeah.
kind of periods where you're closer and then periods where it feels like a little bit more apart
Hmm.
or like, you throw kids into that mix
Oh,
and it
I
gets
know.
all like
Yeah.
more complicated
Yep.
or at least just less predictable,
Yeah. Well,
right?
even friends, long-term friends, when you become in with someone else, your dynamic
Mm-hmm.
changes, your family culture changes, right? And being able to match that with the single relationship that you had before also becomes a challenge. Like there's
Yeah.
many times in life, I think, where things do just sort of weave apart, weave
Mm-hmm.
together, cross over, and then sometimes wander away. And I think that's all normal and fine, right? I think that's growth.
I think it's normal and
Mm-hmm.
fine,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that I think about is how does it affect um since this is a self-awareness journey podcast, how is it affecting how does that feel for you as the
Mm.
person, as you in the relationship, not projecting onto how your
Right,
spouse feels or your
right,
friend
right.
feels. How does like those cycles through a relationship
Mm.
make you feel? And are you aware of those feelings, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
uh I think that how we feel about a relationship sometimes isn't super apparent to us right away.
Yeah.
Or we could be in a relationship for like quite a long time and
Mm-hmm.
not realize that we're feeling a certain way about it.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree with you. And actually, those relationships that have stood the test of time and have made it past that checkpoint are usually the ones who can see it before you do even,
Mm,
right? So like I'll give you two examples because I think that's such a good perspective. There are times in my relationship, in my marriage, where we are in a low point, which
hmm
is like you're talking about, everybody has that, or at least I believe everyone has that. And I will know now consciously, probably in the last 10 years, I will say like, ugh, we're in this stage. I hate this stage. Just doesn't,
mm,
I'm just mad about it. It's so much work. It feels hard. Everything feels hard.
hmm
And I find I am
mm,
more short tempered because I'm expecting what it's going to be like, and just
hmm
sort of, I don't like it. So I'm already responding to it, even though it hasn't fully manifested, even maybe.
hmm
Just the idea that it's going to, I just start to feel. And so I know I'm not being open then, and I'm not being flexible, which then adds to it, right?
makes it worse.
Yes, of course it does. It's like you're manifesting what you're
Yep.
thinking. It's like whatever your fear is, well, that's what you're bringing to the party is that.
hmm
Um, in my friend groups, this is really interesting. So I have a very dear friend. We've been best friends since we were 14. And there are times in my life where I feel personally unstable about something,
mm,
having a really hard time. Emotionally, I'm really down. And um, and then what I do is I turn in. I get very quiet. I step
mm,
out of everything. I don't want people in. I just shut down.
hmm
And for many years when we were younger, she would call and she'd say, "Are you mad at me? Are you mad at me?" And um, and I was mad at myself.
mm,
And I didn't know how to communicate that because I felt like I was failing, right,
hmm
in a number of fronts. But now, in the last several years, she'll just say, "Oh, you've been pretty quiet. What's going on with you?"
mm,
Like she'll pull it out, and I'll be like, "Oh, I'm doing it again." Like sometimes I don't even notice that I
hmm.
am. So I think that's interesting is those relationships can be a mirror to help you see something because you're on autopilot or shut
Yep.
down or
Yep.
taking an emotional break or whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's a great story because it shows kind of like how in a younger relationship,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the times the way, someone else is showing up,
Mm-hmm.
you think it's like your fault.
Yeah, you take it personally.
You
You
take
make
it
it
on
about
you.
you.
But in a more mature relationship, you could see like, oh, wait, no, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's not about me, it's about them. And then how do I support my
Right,
partner there? Right.
right, right. Yeah. And with
Yep.
this girlfriend, not all that long ago, we had this little space and it was me. It was me. And so she just waited me out.
Mm,
And then she's like, okay, well, let's get together. And so we got
mm-hmm.
together and I was like, oh, is she gonna get mad? Is she gonna ask me all these things? And I was like, do you want to talk about it? She goes, we don't have to. She goes, it doesn't matter if you want to. And she said, I'm your ride or die. It's okay. And I felt so supported
That's
by
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I do think that there's a lot of really interesting things that happen. And sometimes those long relationships can help us be a mirror when
Yeah.
we can't see how we're doing.
Yep. Let's talk about how people change over the course of a relationship,
Hmm.
because it's like, you might, I mean, a marriage is a great example, but
Yeah.
even your friends group, like I know that my friend group has
Mm-hmm.
changed
Yeah.
quite a bit
Yeah, for sure.
over the past, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously like my marriage hasn't changed, right? But I think it's really interesting to think about like how relationships change over a course of time and how you want to or don't want to change with it.
Yeah. Well, I would say one thing in what you just said in your statement, and I would say your marriage probably has really changed. So
Yeah,
I
it
bet you
probably has.
all of
Yeah.
them have, because I think that this is the most interesting thing, and this comes up a lot in coaching, is that when people work on themselves specifically to grow or to change or to be a
Mm-hmm.
little different, and their partner doesn't, it creates a growth gap.
Mm,
And a lot of times we want to be different so badly. We want to grow. We want to be this, like new version of ourselves.
mm-hmm.
And yet, the people that love us the most, if they don't come with us in that journey, a lot of the times we feel like we aren't being successful in our own growth, or we feel naturally inclined to judge them for not wanting to do the same
Mm,
growth work that we are in the same moment.
mm-hmm.
I see that all the time in coaching. Um, and I think what I always say to people is, people grow at different rates.
Mm-hmm.
You can be on a path with someone. I mean, it's just like if you've run a marathon. I've run a couple marathons, which I won't ever do again. But the interesting thing about a marathon is that you start at the starting line and you run, right? You start. If you're really new running marathons, you run too fast out of the start line. And if you're a real seasoned marathon runner, you keep a real consistent cadence the whole time, right? But
Mm-hmm.
throughout that 26.2 miles, you'll see people pass, and then the other will pass again. And then you'll pass them, and then they'll pass you. Yeah.
Back and forth.
And that is the exact same thing with emotional and mental growth as well.
Hmm.
And we have to, again, that's where I would encourage people to have more grace about that, because that's where a lot of people get judgy
Mm-hmm.
and they start holding things against those around them. If they're growing and they don't perceive the other people around them are participating in the same way, they can start to get kind of judgy.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's sometimes there's a point where it's like one person has grown and the other person says, I don't like that. I'm just going to stick.
Yes.
I don't like, what that change is. So I'm going to move on.
That's true. That's true. And sometimes
Right.
it does change the relationship or end the relationship. And
Mhm.
if it's a really dramatic example, I think that's fine. Honestly, I think that's okay. But I think a lot of the times it is just people so desperately wanting to feel that they're doing something, that they are successful, whatever that looks like,
Mhm.
that they push themselves into an uncompromised state of growth with the expectation that can never be met by others.
Mm.
And so it depends on if it's a personal challenge, that it's a personal perspective, or it is truly you've really grown naturally, organically in the people around you, or some of them haven't.
Yeah. Yep.
And it might be
Or-
time.
Or again, are those relationships like serving you anymore, helping you anymore,
Yes.
supporting you anymore? And
Yeah.
sometimes they just aren't, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's kind of like the whatever, old high school friends? Like,
Mm-hmm.
are you holding on to relationships that
Yeah.
aren't helping you anymore?
Yeah. Well, like I've said, and I maybe said in a podcast before, but John Maxwell always says you're a product of the top 5 people you spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
Choose wisely.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty intense when you think about it like
You made me now start thinking of my list.
Don't leave me. Yeah, it's interesting. I do think that as we've talked to, we didn't talk a lot about the list of things that might not be favorable with long relationships, but I think that it's easy to take advantage of others in a long relationship because we take advantage of their goodwill. We take advantage of their trust. We take advantage of not in a deep way, but I mean more in just being a bit lazy.
Yeah.
We take advantage of their tolerance, perhaps.
Yeah. And I'd say, like, if you're in a marriage, I'll observe some people take advantage of sort of like the commitment. Like, I've committed to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now let's push.
Yeah, right to the ragged edge.
Right to the edge of what the test that commitment level, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
That's not good.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes we have patterns that aren't probably helpful. Personal patterns, whether they be emotional reactions to things, whether it be thinking patterns about money or vacation or kid rearing or anything like that.
Yep.
And if those patterns don't match in a long-term relationship, it can be very wearing. And we can lose flexibility.
Yeah.
So I think that I think that it's important to sort of take an inventory on, are you really honoring the long-term relationships you've got?
And sometimes, like, it can be boring, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the same thing.
Yeah.
And then because, depending on your, like, desire for drama, if you're not getting enough of it, like, on TV, you might just decide to go make some of your own drama.
I think that's true, too. I think that's true. Like, yeah.
Because it's boring,
Because
right?
it's boring. Oh, that's interesting.
All right. Well, this is a pretty good primer on relationships. We could talk about relationships. There's so much to talk about with relationships.
Oh,
like,
I
we
know.
could dive into so many, like, little details, but this was a good, like, overview.
Yeah. And I think long partnerships of any variety are, like the old adage, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold. Do you remember that childhood poem or whatever? And I've always thought that. I've always thought I was a very wealthy person in gold because I just feel so fortunate that the relationships that I've had, I do have a number of really long partnerships with people, and I really feel fortunate as a result of that, and try to not take advantage of it, even though sometimes I know I'm not my best self, but my intention is always to be my best. And I love that feeling of those relationships.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well. Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation, and share this episode with them.
We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring.